Okay, today we're going to look at basic audio in Max, what was formerly known as MSP, Max Signal Processing. We're just going to do some basics of what we did in class in the past week. If you're there, or just can introduce you through the basics of audio. Some things to know if you're doing this. Before you get going too far, it's always good to check your audio status in Max, because this shows you what your input device and your output device is. I'm using a K-Mix. I'm here at home. I have the Keith McMillan mixer audio interface attached to my computer. So the Max objects we're going to use now for audio are all going to have a tilde after the name, or tilde is what's to the left of the one key on your keyboard. It also can look a bit like a sine wave, and that's why I think it's being used. So I'm going to say new object, and I'm going to take a saw tilde, which is an anti-alias sawtooth oscillator. Give it a frequency argument of 220. And you'll notice also now that I'm working with audio, I'm going to be working with floating point numbers a lot more than I was when I was working with MIDI. So I have a sawtooth wave. In its most basic sense, I can send it into an easy DAC, which is an easy digital to analog converter. What's easy about it is that it is a way to turn audio processing on and off straight from the object itself, using it like a button. So audio is only processed in Max when audio processing is explicitly turned on. So you have to turn it on. So what you might want to do at this point is turn your volume down just a little bit, because this is going to be a full volume sawtooth wave. You can lock the patch and click. Click on the Easy DAC. Click off the Easy DAC when you're done to turn the audio processing off. To go back into audio status, you'll notice a few other things about the window. It gives you a CPU, percentage of CPU that's being used for audio processing. Now it's only for audio processing. Doesn't take care of anything the operating system's doing, any of the MIDI processing, or even later on, any of the video processing that Max can do. So if you're just doing digital audio, even with the computer, doing anything else, you really don't want to get above 80%, because your user interface is going to start to slow down. But you can see again as I click, single sine wave is hardly using any processing power. So it's rounding off. It's obviously not 0, but it's not yet above 0.5%, so it's not showing up. So if I want to have some more control, as you also notice before I go on, anything that's carrying an audio signal, any patch cord is now no longer solid. It is a bumblebee. It's yellow and dark gray, or yellow and black by default. You can change the colors of patch cords. It'll only just change the yellow part. But I'm going to unlock my patch, select those, and spread out, because I'm going to do some control of this. So first, what would be really nice is to have some amplitude control, so it's just not so loud. If I want to change amplitude, if I'm mixing a signal at a mixing board and I'm changing the gain, I am multiplying a scaling factor by it. So I need a multiply object with a tilde, because I'm going to do audio rate multiplication. And I type in an argument, let's say 0.25. And I'll connect it to both channels of the Easy DAC. So this is sending audio directly out to my audio interface. And I'll have the sawtooth wave coming in. And now if I lock my patch, it's not as loud. If I want to see some specifics, I can put some meters on my patch. I'm going to put a couple meters over here on the left. So I'm going to do some commenting as well. There's my sawtooth wave. Going to do amplitude scaling. I'm going to put some meters. So there's a couple of meters I could use. There's something called meter tilde, which is like a visual LED meter. Can go sideways. Turn my audio back on. You see that I'm at full output from the sawtooth wave. Locked here, so if I make it more tall than wide, it will be a vertical meter. There's also another one called level meter tilde, and that gives you a kind of analog style root mean squared setup. So I can take both of these, bring them down here. And you can see that because of the amplitude scaling, my signal coming out of the multiply is less than my full signal coming out of the sawtooth. I've got one other way of looking at signal. If probing is turned on under the debug menu, then whenever I mouse over a patch cord, I will see a level coming out of the patch cord. Now you can see it fluctuating, but it's not fluctuating between 1 and -1 or 0.25 and -0.25. It's jumping all around. And that's because up here under my audio status, I've got an input-output vector size and a signal vector size. So the input-output is how many samples at a time are being sent to the audio interface or being received from it. The signal vector size in samples is the number of samples that Max is processing at a time, because you know that digital audio processes in buffers or in vectors. So this will have some impact on the fine-tuning of delay lines later on, but in general, like any other software, the higher the vector size, the lower processing load on the CPU, but the more latency, because it means you have to wait for the entire set of samples to generate an operation. And if it's say if I'm waiting for 44,100 samples to do an operation, then I'm going to have a delay of a second, because that's the sampling rate per second. So what probing is catching is every so often it's catching, according to the vector size, it's catching the peak or the instantaneous amplitude at that moment. So I want to have some ability to change stuff, and I can do that with floating point for amplitude again. Unlock, and I'll type an F for floating point, connect it in, and once I turn back on, I'll change. You'll notice some clicking, perhaps. And you also hear it when I go below 0. But you're hearing some instantaneous changes. So when you do amplitude changes or any type of change to an audio signal, instantaneously it creates a click. You have a jump in the waveform and you have a click. So I need to do some smoothing, and I can do that with a line object, line tilde. What line tilde takes is, it outputs a signal, audio rate signal, so it's changes audio smoothly, but it takes a target and a time to get there. So I can use a message with the $1, which gets replaced by any input, and say 50 milliseconds as the target time, or time to target. And now, if I turn it back on, right now you're hearing nothing because the line is outputting 0, which has totally replaced anything that's in the argument. But if I change, you Now you don't hear any stepping or clicking. It's a smooth change. You can also go above 1, and it's distorted. It's distorted no matter if I go above 1 or below -1. So I need to put some limits. If I want to use an amplitude argument, I should have some limits. Over here in the inspector for number, I'm going to put the minimum of 0 with a point and the maximum of 1 with a decimal point. So now I can't drag past it. And if I enter in a number like 5, it becomes 1. So I'm dragging in the number box. Depending on how far to the right of the decimal point I drag, that's the resolution I get. Okay. So adding some more comments, that's my amplitude. And line does the smoothing of my amplitude. Okay. So then I can also change frequency. I can do it the same way. I'll need a line, tilde. At this point now, output is 0 because the line is outputting 0. So my frequency is 0. The sawtooth's not oscillating. Let's go back up. I'm going to do something a little bit different feeding into saw in that I'm going to have a changeable ramp time. So still going to have a floating point. But I'm going to go into a pack object, 0 point and 0 point. It's a 2-item list. Both of them are floats. So the first thing is frequency goes in the left, but I want to have another, and I can just do an integer. This is going to be my ramp time. So this is my frequency. And this is my ramp time, or portamento time, in old analog synthesis terms. So I didn't give an argument. I could have given a default argument of 50. So that by default now, without typing anything in, ramp time is going to be 50 milliseconds. And you hear it kind of gliss. And when I move it with my mouse, it's a little smoother. So you can decide though, do I want a short ramp time, maybe 10 milliseconds? Right? So smoother, or I could have something longer, like 500 milliseconds or half a second. And as I pull up, it takes a while to catch up to my mouse because of the ramp time. So anytime frequency comes in, it creates a list of this number and either the default argument or anything I've typed in. That gets sent out to line as a pair. Line interprets it as target and time to target, sends that out as an ramped audio signal. And in fact, I've got that typed into frequency. I can probe over the line. I'm going to type in 100. And you see the signal change. It just ramps from place to place. And I can stop. So this is a basic changeable oscillator. It's the first step in creating digital audio. I can control frequency of an oscillator and amplitude of that output. All right, so that's the first part. I'm going to stop there.